Okay, we are live with Real Fridays every Friday at well, typically it was 11:30 or 12 o'clock, but 11:30 every Friday is Real Fridays, and we've done this video podcast for approximately 3 years now. For the most part, every single Friday. There's been a few Fridays that we've missed in this period of time, but I am Dr. Rick Rock. I started this video podcast with Brock Cassidy and Jeremy Potter. They're no longer they went on to other efforts business-wise, but so I've kind of continued the Real Fridays podcast. And the focus of Real Fridays historically has been to interview thought leaders, mortgage bankers, technology executives, investment banks on the status of the mortgage industry. We've talked about housing market trends, technology trends, origination trends, and it's been probably most helpful with mortgage professionals as well as investors. A lot of investors, I get phone calls from investment banks, from institutional investors in San Francisco and in New York City, really looking to invest in this space, either to raise capital for a mortgage company, a consumer direct platform, or to put money into various technology companies. And of course, as of late, there's been so many AI companies that have really popped out, edging their way to try to gain as much of the AI market share as mortgage lenders as they can achieve from mortgage lenders. And it's been an incredibly valuable experience, at least for me. Having been in the business for 25 years, you see certain patterns emerge. Okay, in some cases there are new things that emerge that are historically very unique to the present market circumstance. But for the most part, life has a way of repeating itself, and adoption is never as quick and easy as one might expect or might want if you're a technology vendor. Part of the market demand or the market perception around AI was that so much of the workforce was going to migrate toward AI, and it was going to eliminate jobs. Now, one analysis of that. Now, I do from a middle to longer term, I do believe that's the case. Okay, but so much money has been raised around these AI companies that they almost had to sing as a collective chorus that, look, the world's going to change very soon, very fast. And that kind of narrative gets people excited, and they don't want to get behind on the 8 ball from an investment standpoint. So it creates this investment urgency. You don't want to be last to the party, right? So a lot of these investors will come in and they react and respond to that kind of market call to action related to these AI technology companies. And so I think there's a lot of hype, as KP has mentioned many times. I think there's a lot of hype around it, but there is a fundamental reality to all of it, and that is scale is going to be enabled. We're going to see a couple things. We're going to see mortgage lenders consolidating production in ways we haven't seen in the past. The mortgage market has been very fractured as an industry for the most part, and so you might do $2.5 trillion as an industry, or 2.3, 2.4. And it's been sort of spread out across 30,000 or so lenders across the country. The reality, though, is that the focus is with AI, it's going to accelerate growth on in my view, a select few lenders. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to get, like when I was an executive across country, I know I changed my thoughts midstream here, but when I was on the leadership team there, I want to say we did 28 billion, 30 billion. And that was just a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And Ron now will do probably 60 billion, 65 billion. And probably in my last conversation with him, he was talking about doing 100 billion here in the next year and a half. And that kind of growth is unprecedented for mortgage lenders in the non-depository realm. I know at NFM, we've gone from, 3-4 years ago, we were doing $1 billion, $2 billion a year. Or I should say 2019, probably around $2 billion. And then in the present day, we'll do just shy of about 10 billion. which is unimaginable growth for most leaders, quite frankly. As in some of the research that I've done in the past, there's only about 186 lenders or so that do $1 billion or more a year, right? And so it's not very many. If we look at Redder, you'll see the concentration of production occurring across really, the top 15, top 20 in the United States. And I do think that there's an interesting common denominator around that, and that is the investment in technology, the investment in AI that enables scale. I was working on some projects in 2021, 2022 around AI, but I was shocked to see how advanced NFM was in their AI research and efforts and deployments. Christos, the CIO over at NFM, company where I'm a part of, I was shocked at how far advanced they were with their partnership with Inside.ai to be able to drive certain efficiencies in scale and more on the sales side. And KP made this comment recently where his focus was really just increasing the AI related enhancements around the sales side to create demand in a way where it'll then prioritize change on the operational side. So that's why you see kind of this shift within AI organizations. You get companies like Copperlane. You get companies who AI companies that are well funded. I think Copperlane raised $4 or $5 million recently. Incredibly talented group of people who have whose main value proposition is to work with an entire organization and the entire workflow to be able to increase the production efficiencies so that processors and underwriters can close 40, 50, 60, 70 loans a month, and it not be such a strain on them from a resource capacity standpoint. Loyola.ai is another company, incredible company, that does a very similar kind of value proposition, gaining a lot of traction with mortgage lenders and credit unions, community banks, and mortgage banks on the growth there. And what's interesting about AI is very bacterial. It's not what I tend to say. It's very agnostic in the way that it looks at mortgage technology. In the traditional world, you had POS, CRM, loan origination systems. You had capital market systems. You had back office servicing platforms with Black Knight, and they were very segmented, right? And they're generally controlled by 2 or 3 dominant players. And if any other up and coming startup were to expand their feature functionality, they would make it difficult for them, because ultimately those 2 or 3 dominant players you needed to integrate with, whether it was Encompass or Black Knight, on the back end, or Blend on the front end, or it was top of mind at the time for CRM. And so if you started to expand your scope, if you started playing outside of your lane, they would create integration challenges, right, to kind of keep you in your lane. AI is so fascinating because it ends up becoming kind of the air that you breathe. It ends up being sort of the ecosystem under which these platforms then sort of operate. And so you get a solution like Loyola or Copperlane, where they're kind of a platform that could do anything, right? They have their tentacles in POS, into CRM, pulling data and assigning data into the system of record, which is in most cases, Encompass or ICE, or at least it is for us at NFM. It could be, could be any number of the new, LOSs, that are out there. Vesta, is another one. Mike Yu is an incredible innovator in that regard, making incredible traction. But the reality is these AI platforms have their almost like a marionette. They have their strings in the mortgage ecosystem, right? So they can pull on the POS or the CRM or the loan origination system, or in the back-end reporting, or in the back-end servicing. And so their value proposition has been very difficult to quantify, right? Because the systems are so far-reaching in their potential. And so they've been very smart, I think, in in taking very specific use cases and saying, let's start here. Let's start here. Let's identify some metrics you want to expand and improve upon. Let's start there. You want to lose the cost to close loan? What are the main drivers of that cost to close loan or the expense? Underwriting salaries, processing salaries, closer salaries, funders, capital market wages, and ultimately sales wages, loan origination comp, and so on. So you start, breaking down the use cases and where the major cost, architectural costs to manufacture a loan are. And then AI has the opportunity to create massive enhancements around this. But you got to work really closely with your partner. These companies, in my view, I don't represent Copperlane, and quite frankly, I don't represent Loyola or any of these platforms. I do have a relationship with Flare. I'm a board advisor with Flare, and I'll speak about that in a second. But a lot of these platforms like Loyola or Copperlane are more toolkits to be able to apply to specific use cases and to drive efficiencies. They're not sort of products per se, okay? They're much more focused around specific use cases to be able to drive specific outcomes, to be able to realize specific gains within the mortgage workflow. And there's tremendous value to that. The downside is most mortgage companies don't have a clue. Most mortgage companies are led by individuals that really aren't as sophisticated when it comes to looking at the flow and to be able to identify these opportunities for growth and be able to identify these major opportunities for margin, and then to be able to have the planning, the leadership, the capital, and the implementation lifestyle in order to adopt the brand. Mike Keller, I'm going to go ahead and finish my thought, and I'll bring you in, Mike, because this is a perfect segue. I was talking about how challenges, how most mortgage companies don't have the capital, leadership, or the project management to be able to scope out specific use cases to say, I'm gonna take pick an AI or pick a tech platform, Mike. They just not to put you on the spot, just
like
pick
Claude,
one.
like Claude, or more like,
let's say some of the companies you've worked with or some of the companies that you admire.
SEI I've seen come onto the stage a lot more recently.
So you take these companies and most mortgage companies struggle with the project management, identifying the use case, identifying the benefit, and then identifying the application of these solutions in order to drive that intended result. Because most mortgage companies are like focusing on, it's July 3rd. What are we going to close this month? Thinking of the middle to longer term investment and opportunity for growth, right? So they stumble over. So you get an AI technology platform whose specific design is the flexibility to be able to customize it and to be able to expand on specific use cases. But most mortgage companies are focused on the here and now, and they're not focused on, how can we improve Q1 of 2027? Now, unless you're a top mortgage lender, and I think that's what separates top mortgage lenders from anyone else, is because there's the capital and the leadership to kind of take a step back and say, like, how do we reimagine the workflow? How do we hire people like you, Mike, or others to say, how do we take a step back and reimagine what this should look like? And then we're actually going to make it happen through some of these new AI tools. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that premise?
It makes total sense.
I mean, is that a separator, would you say, between top lenders and everyone else?
Yeah, I live it every day. I think even at top lenders, it's a problem. They're just handling it better than the small lenders that don't know. They almost don't know the why. And so they're just chasing to have AI. And I think the problem with AI too is it's an early adopter piece. So it's like when I had the app, not everybody adjusts to early adoption. So the culture in your mortgage company is not ready for it. Your consumers, if you have a consumer facing new AI way to take an application. I was talking with somebody today that could actually turn off 90% of your potential clients because they're not as advanced as even like loan officers traditionally. Loan officers might be some of the first people to get the first iPhone when it comes out.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean everybody gets an iPhone as soon as it comes out. And so I think or somebody was talking the other day, like, the chat bots that you have for internal loan scenario desk, pieces like this. You just got to ask these questions like, am I actually going to hurt input if my loan officers are now all day? Think of how addicting vibe coding is. So if they're interacting with these chats all day rather than out there selling, and I think because lenders don't have the role you say, they go to both extremes. They either say, well, cancel the project, I want my people out there selling, or they say, I don't want AI, or let's go all in on AI and forget those people out there selling. So I think that role is important. I don't see it very often. I think it's a threat in some cases. And I will say I'm starting to see couple large top lenders. They're starting to put what the AI does into the org chart. And I would say that's step one, is evaluating the AI role as if it's a person to determine if it's actually cost effective in what it does versus what you have today. Even, I hate to say it, but versus offshore pricing. And then eventually, if it starts costing tokens, what's going to be my future cost of this task or procedure being done? So there's a lot to take in. And I think you need somebody like myself. I think they typically go to somebody with an engineering degree because they get AI more. I don't think the industry needs to really get AI more. I think there's plenty out there right now. It's how do you implement it? So you almost need somebody more entrepreneurial, like yourself, like me, somebody that has been in an entrepreneurial mind, has had to create in their own head to stay alive. I think that's the thought process that would be brought in great as a fractional outsider. Just come in for, I always said this, come in for 6 months, give me a roadmap, challenge me. And you don't really need them longer than 6 months because it's going to take you another year to actually start to implement all of those ideas. Like, there's no way you'll be able to keep up with the consultant.
Where do you see, I was talking to KP just the other day, and he made a really smart comment around his focus on the AI front for PRMG was to focus on various sales enhancements, similar to what we've done at NFM. Drive the demand, drive the opportunities for the LO, drive the number of transactions per loan officer as high as you possibly can, and create enough strain in the operation to be able to then move AI and other tools around improving the operational, the process, the operational gains. So that way, as the demand gets elevated, the ability to support that demand gets maybe even equally elevated to that. I thought that was a really smart strategy from an executive, and it mirrors kind of what we've done at NFM. How are you seeing in the conversations with AI? How are you, lenders out there and their applications for it? Are they really kind of similarly focusing on that, or how would you articulate how they're cutting AI into the process?
I mean, I don't like how many of them are doing it, like not how I would do it, but you can put them in different categories. A lot have a neighbor's son or daughter or an engineering degree person that they think they're paying 120,000 that's worth 220,000, and they think they think their strategy, as salespeople do, right, is more about the fact that they have somebody that's worth 250 working for 140 that should be working for Uber, working for them, and they're building like in-house sales items on Claude. So like internal competitor to HomeBot or Mortgage Coach, just something that's not going to do what the software does, but is a little bit more customized to whatever you can build in Claude. The other is just buying the vendors and shopping around for your different stack of which vendors to go with, the vendor stack. Um, I think those are the two big ones I see. So it's either, or a hybrid. We're going to use vendors, but we have this person, we sit in an island and we have them Claude code ideas that we come up with. And the final one, I think, is just if you're a big enough company, there are some that incentivize the loan officers to submit AI projects or AI prompts and try and grow everything, collectively. And I actually don't even see a common theme of where AI sits. Some people have it in marketing. Some people have it with their role-wise when I think of this.
Yeah.
Some people have their CMO overseeing it. Some people have their COO. The CIO will try and take control of it. And then there's CTO. And so, in mortgage, CIO traditionally was in charge of, that's not innovation, that's just information, was in charge of like these phone cables plugging in and out,
Yeah,
right?
all the technology related needs. Yeah.
And now they should be in charge of a lot of like cybersecurity, but like that stuff's not fun. So they're trying to take the AI fun thing into their category.
You raise a really good point, because it's so frustrating to deal with mortgage companies where they have, the head of technology, the CIO or the CTO, as being the main point of contact for AI. And I think that's such a failure of an attitude, because they end up being the gatekeepers, you know? And the reality is they're a support organization, a service organization to ops and sales. So the two organizations that should be probably the most in tune, not in the nuts and bolts of AI, but the outcomes of AI, should be, ops and sales, in my view, right? And the problem is it becomes kind of an inverse funnel. It ends up starting with some CIO, CTO who thinks they can build it themselves, who thinks that they can do anything and everything themselves, and any tool or solution that an AI company delivers, they feel almost jeopardized, like their role is being jeopardized if they were to sort of engage with this organization and cut them in. And they end up crippling organizations, right? As opposed to saying, look, this is our use case. This is what we're going to do. We need to use these tools, and we're going to meet sales and ops. We're going to meet with these organizations ourselves to determine what the outcome is. And yes, we'll bring you in to determine if they're SOC 2 compliant and they're not going to jeopardize the integrity or our client data. But it has to start with a use case. It's got to start with the ability for loan officers to do more loans, processors to process more loans, and underwriters to underwrite more loans, or organizations to process or underwrite more loans. You may not even need. I mean, Better. Ryan was talking about how, Better and Neo have gotten rid of all their processors, which was a shocking claim that he made over at Amir's SalesCon conference in Chicago. He said they got rid of all their processors. I'd love to actually underpin that, quite frankly, because it was such a bold claim. But to me, I think it is kind of the future, where if 92% of our loans are pretty vanilla loans, for the most part, if only 6, 7, 8% loans are non-QM, and for the most part, most Fannie Freddie loans and even most FHA loans are pretty sort of quote unquote vanilla for their respective categories. You don't necessarily need a human underwriter to be able to do those loans. I mean, it makes no sense. Like, why would you? Now non-QM's different story. FHA, different story. Sub 620, different story.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest problem that plagues our industry right now is just titles in general. I think they're archaic. I think they need a makeover, and I think they stunt our growth. You look at like tech companies now, they have customer success, like they're called like CS officers. Then they have onboarding officers, and there's just so much place for growth as a human being, especially when you're younger, and it's not just all about maybe certain money level to live a life. It's where can I grow? If you're a processor anyway, I mean, all you can grow to really is head of processing, and from there you have to go all the way up the elevator to a COO. There's like no in between. Or a loan officer, where do you? I was talking with somebody else. At least some companies are starting to create coaches. Like the title of coaching and coaching programs is more to give loan officers an actual internal feeling of an actual growth of their role and what they do. So I think a lot of these AI agents are going to have exceptions. I think there needs to be people that manage these AIs. I think there's room for a lot of new names to titles and a lot of ways for lenders to rewrite their org chart, not around 5 skyscrapers called underwriting, processing, QC, and compliance, but an org chart no different than what the names that Tesla uses or Salesforce. I think AI might be the way to do it, because look, you replace the processor. Where Better's probably going to mess up is there should be new names for who's in charge of all of the exceptions that AI finds that is actually going to call the customer and do it. And it sounds like they're handing it down to the loan officer, and that is us going back to the way it's always been. Like, it's going back to that skyscraper where everything's under that loan officer. They should have head of CS or CS or CS ops, or just different ways for us to advance as an industry so that we can not have people keep thinking that they're only as good as what they did the last 30 days.
Well, unfortunately, most mortgage companies are measured that way, and they're just so obsessed with, and I understand it. Like I spent most of my career helping companies doing 500 million a year to $1.5 billion a year. And because of the lack of capital, and I think the leadership behind it, the focus was just on the here and now. And I think it's a compensation issue too, quite frankly, because the leaders are often compensated on monthly production volume, and so all they care about is that override or whatever the case is, month in, month out. But what were some of the headlines that jumped out at you? Again, not to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious if anything jumped out at you trend-wise in the last week or so, or the last 2 weeks. Has there anything that happened in the market where you said to yourself, oh, this is really interesting, or this really, because I have a couple thoughts on that, but I'm curious if you had any thoughts on it as well.
Oh yeah. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see you. Dude, okay. I can see those blue eyes.
Perfect. The SoFi. What SoFi announced in their quarterly stock release, that's now public information, is what I would, if that was available to work with mortgage companies on, and I guess that's like eating an elephant, and it's hard to do. And this goes beyond the Everything app. I know people know I love mobile apps, but it's just as simple as, it starts with one fact that they reject 80% of their incoming applicants because they do have tough guidelines. And then they're able to have a 43% cross buy rate of those rejected people with other product they offer. So because they have business loans, commercial loans, HELOCs, think of it as a mortgage company. That would be, you reject 80% of your business, and you're still able to give 43% a consumer loan, a HELOC, a business loan, because it's still the best product for them. But your guidelines are a little less tight around those because that's what the market says. And I believe their ability to get those people back is staggering too. So making this assumption that they're not going to like an 18% personal loan, the market's saying that's not true. They're coming right back to those people for business loans, for HELOCs, for boat loans, and for mortgages. And so they've done a great job of getting people in an ecosystem. I think our industry naturally just wants to build the Everything app, but it just starts with fundamentals of, what are you doing for personal loans right now? If they're so good at giving personal loans to the people they reject, do you reject people at your company? Well, let's start to look at what personal loans. And I'll say one more thing, because I've been thinking about this. Like with Equifax and the data that's available, you can look back 5 years of your pre-qual folder, your closed folder, your adverse loan folder, and you can really start to connect these days with AI. And did they go out and end up getting a personal loan? Then why do you feel so guilty as a loan officer being the person that told them they shouldn't get one when 43% are getting it anyways? Wouldn't you rather help and be the resource that they call when they need to navigate that again? And I think I used to do it as a loan officer too. You have like, it's like imposter syndrome for a mortgage loan officer. Like you feel like you have to be a financial advisor, like they're your kids. They're going to go get the loan anyway. The data is going to show that. Just be there for them through the good and bad decisions. I think that would be a better role than always having to say, well, then they're going to go out. If I give them a HELOC, then they'll go use those credit cards again. The stats are showing if you don't do it, the world has made it easy. They're going to be able to find where to go get that loan. You're not the only place now in town. So you might as well be the advisor of their entire lifetime of how they go from, and they do student loans, personal loans, off the box loans. So there are loans that, especially if you're in non-QM now, they're going to the same places, right? They're just securitized differently. So that one stood out.
No, I think that I mean, it's pretty fascinating. I don't track. SoFi doesn't come up on my radar as much because they're not as aggressive, obviously on the mortgage side. Obviously, they're sort of an ecosystem player, but they're a fascinating, incredibly well capitalized, organization that could easily, probably migrate. I think it's probably more of a subject matter expert kind of barrier, for because they probably don't have a lot of mortgage professionals that are in management ranks or executive ranks that actually could help them bleed into the space. Probably the one exception in reverse is Mike Cagney going from SoFi over to Figure. I mean, it's incredible what he's done, but it's funny how when he came into mortgage, there really was a tremendous amount of opposition to him. And they never really accepted him as a part of the mortgage sort of ecosystem from a leadership standpoint. And now he's sort of undeniably, in that role. But that is pretty fascinating. I know Ali just left Guild and went to SoFi to kind of drive their marketing efforts. I mean, that was a pretty interesting crossover. Probably phenomenal. She's had a great career.
And she gets the next level of borrowers, right? I think.
Oh yeah.
You hear all the time that we really don't have the stats outside of Bruce at JD Power. If these digital first born kids are going to, I don't mean to call Allie a kid, but when they were kids, they were digital first. What the numbers are on them clicking on places like SoFi. And I will give you a number. They did $1.2 billion of first and second mortgage volume in Q1 this year. And so that's 1.2 billion in Q1, and they did a total of 12 billion of total loans in Q1.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I think what stood out to me over the last week or so, I mean, it goes without standing as far as the Two Harbor, vote going, the direction of cross country. I predicted that was not going to be the case, and I was texting with Ron a couple of days ago. Just congratulating him, on the announcement and just the strength that position has. Look, it's less about servicing and all about top of funnel. Like you got to get to the consumer, whether it's like when a consumer goes into a Starbucks, for God's sakes, there should be some way of connecting that consumer to the likelihood, the probability of them getting a mortgage or refinancing the mortgage they have, right? And so there, in a lender's perfect world, like my kid, I have 7 kids, and my kids, none of them own homes yet. And my oldest is 30. Of course, my youngest is 14. But to be able to sort of track their spending behavior, because there's going to get to a point, right? It's like kids either it's very bimodal. I'm seeing kids either pull the trigger on a mortgage in their 20s, right? Or they wait until they're mid to late 30s. There's almost 2 distributions, right? And I do think that there's a way of pattern recognizing financially these kids who get to a place of readiness to qualify for a mortgage. And in most cases, they're ready and they don't even know it. And so I'm having these debates with my 30-year-old around where, he just got married. And I said, Noah, it's we can get you a home. Let's figure this out, right? And in that demographic, especially, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty around, well, can I afford it? Can I afford the long-term issues? Can I afford when the AC, goes out, or so there's any maintenance on the home? And the reality is, like, most people, I don't think of that. I think most people think of, like, let's just get into a home and we'll figure it out, you know? And I sense a sense of trepidation of that group, that cohort of millennials who say to themselves, I saw hardship with my parents in 08. I was born from 2001, 9/11. I saw hardship in 08, 09, and COVID really messed with things. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel secure enough to commit to a mortgage, when the reality is the most stable and the most foundational thing you can do, regardless of rates. I don't even care about rates. You can always get into a better rate downstream if you have a good loan officer or you're aware of what your options are, right?
Yeah. It's the sooner mortgage companies can become data companies. Like, if you want to know how much money you can make as a data company, run into somebody that owns a data company. And the mortgage industry has the ability to do it, and you could do it at scale. Like, this play, I think, just opens up so much scale of data. You could do it small too, because it's hard to execute. So if you have less data, sometimes it's easier to figure it out and then scale it up. Like, it's not just having the data. You have to figure out how to show you can execute on the data and enrich that data. So I think, getting Round Point with that servicing package, I think is very valuable to all of them, because I am seeing IMBs are slowly convincing their loan officers that having a centralized call center to call your loan off, and it's the threat of these Mr. Coopers and big servicers that has, I think, finally got loan officers, not all of them, but opt in to say, yeah, you can call my past clients. I'll take less of a bit, but at least then I can call the real estate agents and give them referrals on deals I might have missed because I don't call every day. And so and finding people to call is a very difficult thing to do. It's a tough lifestyle, right? Like, coming in and nailing the phones every day and managing that and hiring and firing and people getting burnt out. And so to get Round Point, somebody so gifted at it, and not have to build it from scratch. I'm working with at least 5 IMBs that are very good size, starting to build a consumer direct unit. And I think they're starting to realize, like, reaching people, what to say in the first 5 seconds of reaching people is so important and so valuable. And the more you know about mortgage, almost the worst.
Isn't it funny, Mike? Isn't it funny, though, about consumer direct? It used to be such a niche. You were either consumer direct or you're retail, and it was such a hard wall. And don't you think AI is making that far more accessible, so that everyone is effectively going to have consumer direct capabilities? Isn't that going to be a leveling, almost like a playing field leveler, so that everyone can participate in consumer direct outreach?
Yeah, everyone has a shot of doing it, right? You have your call for the warm transfer. It eliminates a lot of the burnout of voicemail leaving, but I think people will realize sometimes you can't describe it, but a Wendy or a Susie or a Bill or a Kara, there's something about their voice where they're able to get the borrowers, they're doing 14 units a month, and you feel like you're doing all the sales training and you're only doing 2. I still think the call center is going to be there. I just think it's going to be easier for IMBs to have a call center, because they'd only need to maybe hire 8 when they would normally have to hire 24. Find 8 of those sort of gems. I don't know the model, but I think you're turning over like 16 every 6 months to slowly build up your 8, right? That's kind of how it goes. And then after a while, I think cohorts of your groups spin off and start their own. So then you got to ramp it back up again. The answer, yes. Yes, you're going to see a lot more in between, but I don't think they can just go from chatbot to their current loan officers, because distributed's a different model, right?
Well, what's funny is the other headline that emerged that I think has a lot to do with the ambition for capturing market share and the ambition for not just getting more mortgage loans in the door, but getting more loan officers in the door, is Nexa's announcement. Mike announced yesterday that they bought Evolend, and to basically do servicing. So it's kind of like America's largest broker, and that's not necessarily true, because obviously Barrett, I think Barrett, and I think there's two others ahead of him. I'll have to look at. In fact, let me do this.
Loan Factory, they're always up there.
Oh, they're massive. I mean, let me see if I can. That's
Barrett, Edge, C2, Edge, West Capital's always up there.
Share my screen. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you. So, like, when you look at the top mortgage companies in the country, now these are non-depository, right? So you got, consumer direct, for the most part. Rocket, Cross Country is actually obviously retail with a massive consumer direct platform for the servicing. GR, Guaranteed Rate Freedoms, that's almost all servicing runoff right here, 13 billion year to date. Guild Retail, Mortgage Research Center is largely consumer direct. CMG Retail, Fairway Retail, Loan Depot Retail, Penny is consumer direct servicing. DHI is obviously a builder. Lennar is a builder. New American Movements retail. Barrett's your largest quote unquote broker, right? At 5.8 billion. Wow. Now, the difference with Barrett, what's so interesting about this, what people forget to understand, is that year to date, they're 6 billion. But you see how it's Barrett, and then UWM?
Yep.
What this tells you is UWM closes and funds Barrett's loans for the most part. I bet you 60% of their loans go to UWM. But when they sell things non-Dell to PennyMac, UWM, and Village Capital and so on, those loans are being closed in their name.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they're a quote unquote broker, they're operating like a bank, like a mortgage bank, and they're sending the bulk of their volume to UWM, to AFR, and to Penny, Union, Click and Close, and JMac. Okay, so this is all the loans that they're brokering. But on all this volume here is the volume that they're having closed and funded in their name, but they don't have the expense. They don't have the underwriting closers and funders on staff, which is why they can scale so quickly.
What type of loans do you think are those?
It could be FHA or conventional.
Okay.
For sure.
It's not,
yeah. So when you look at their mix, obviously they're, this percent purchase, this percent refinance, right? They're 62% conventional, 15% VA, 18% FHA, right? So they're 33% or so government and 62% conventional. So it's really a mix of both those products that they're determining whether or not they're going to send that non-Dell or whether or not they're just going to broker it out. And what companies like this do is they establish bulk commitments. And this is what Nexa does. This is what they all do, is they'll say to Penny, hey, I'll give you 100 million this month if you pay me 30 basis points or 35 basis points. And so if you deliver that to them, you'll get 30 or 35 basis points. So most mortgage banks will have a corporate margin of 80, 100, 120 basis points corporate margin. Through various fees in bulk delivery, correspondent relationships, these organizations are basically making the same amount of money, but just in a different way. It's a different shell game.
And that's where loan officers complain. I'm like that they feel like they don't get that extra gain on transaction that they're not being.
And look, 100%, because it's like loan officers either want all the money or they want the best rates, or they want the best rates and all the money. And the reality, both. You just can't, And of course they want all the best technology, and of course they want all the great joint ventures and so on and so forth. But as you go down this list, you got Barrett, which is they're not paying
back if they have a bad month, because I'm guessing if you don't meet the flow, there is a penalty, right? And so They
Correct.
don't factor that in the lunch table when they're complaining about lack of gain.
Yeah, if you fail in your bulk delivery, there'll be a penalty in price on that on future deliveries. Okay, but Lakeview is a servicing platform. New Res is servicing. Mutual Omaha obviously is an insurance company, not retail. And then there's West Capital, and West Capital is the largest Rocket. So if you click on them, you'll see the same thing. You'll see how all this loans are being closed in their name. And then the second largest, or the top three, are Rocket Mortgage and Rocket Mortgage LLC. So those are two entities that they're selling loans to Rocket. And I guarantee you 60+% of their volume is being sold, is being closed funded by Rocket, and it's being closed in their name.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Did you hear in the last week or two how brokers are now opening different companies under different names so they can work with different wholesale lenders, like under that UWM announcement? So UWM doesn't let you work with certain wholesalers.
Yeah.
They've, I guess in certain states there's a loop, like you can just create your own LLC or probably S corp, right? C corp. And then that entity works with Rocket. The other entity works with UWM. That made the news.
I'm not surprised. Because of the contract with UWM. I mean, that's effectively what Nexa is doing. Because you can't, when you're captive like that, when you're selling 50-60% of your loans to a specific organization like Rocket or UWM, they're in essence prohibiting you from going fully delegated. That's the deal, right? So to get around that is you start a separate company that functions separately. So in your case, you're saying instead of to get around having to deal with that conversation with UWM, you just start a separate company because it's easy to do. The bar is so low to do it. You start a separate company, and then you set up a relationship with that company with Rocket, and then you end up, establishing a process where that loan can get sold to that other broker shop to get sold to Rocket, and that money gets paid from Rocket to that mortgage company, and then there can be a lateral financial transfer from that mortgage company to this mortgage company to be able to pay off the loan officer that did the deal. That's the deal. So there's a lot of financial gymnastics that go around that. But no, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think I heard it on a podcast. I'd have to remember where, but it sounded like it had enough traction that it was or in the comment section of someone's LinkedIn, but it sounded like it was happening.
No,
I just found it interesting because you're showing the different ways. You definitely need some hand holding in the beginning. And then I think like with a lot of these models, you get so big that new doors unlock, old doors close, and you don't have to worry about what was going on before. You could outgrow who you started with, right? And so I think even with this cross-country deal with two harbors, now is the time to do it. Like with the way things are regulated. I remember 5 years ago when I had Easy Mortgage Apps, California had just rolled out the CCP, that data protection model. And we all thought if you had more than 50,000 consumers, you were going to have all these new rules around how you handled data. That's gone away. That isn't even we used to advocate, like that was a big subject as before we went and visited all the law and the Congress people on Capitol Hill. We don't even bring it up now. So you can now use all that data. And by the time a new administration comes around and they start to say things about data, you already have all those relationships. You don't have to worry about building them and not knowing who you can trust, who you can't. So I think the times are a big reason this servicing is so popular right now. It's sort of the Wild West on how much data we can really get on people to find out what they're doing. So that now is when you make all the relationships.
And that's the thing is that the big advantage, of course, anyone can get AI, but wouldn't you agree to the fact that the larger organizations have a massive advantage when it comes to AI, because AI only gets better with more data, right? And so the more data you have, the more acute, the more accurate, the more specific that AI model is to be able to answer questions to consumers, to deal with consumer scenarios, because you simply have more to learn from. So I think that's going to be the major. Would you agree with that premise, or would you say like AI is a massive leveler where like the small company can be just as competitive as Rocket because they both use AI?
What you said is couldn't be more true. And the ability to get data out of places. Think of the banks, like now you can get it out of Jack Henry and make sense of who's actually banking with you. That's why you're starting to see the banks will be more aggressive. Maybe it's not mortgage, maybe it's auto, but they are starting to. AI is totally saved them about 15 years of figuring out how to move the data around, not just get it, but move it.
No, that's why I think that like there's such a massive opportunity, for companies. But the problem is that I do think that opportunity is somewhat relative, right? Because a small to mid-sized company can say, "Hey, I have AI," but the problem is you still have a massive disadvantage because you don't have enough AI or enough access to data, like broad enough data set, in order to really be, substantially competitive. I don't know. It'll be fascinating to actually see exactly how the market evolves. But there's two trends that I've noticed. One is the number of high volume loan officers. It used to be like you'd have like Greg Frost was the $1 billion originator, right?
Yeah.
And then you had, you have why am I drawing?
Shant now, but who's back then?
Then you have Shant at $1 billion, right? I think you're going to get more and more $1 billion originators or high volume originators doing 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million a month in volume because of AI. And then number two is you're getting mortgage companies, fewer and fewer IMBs are doing $1 billion a year or more. Fewer, because the larger ones are only getting larger. Companies like NFM and CMG and Loan Depot and so on. We're only getting larger because we're acquiring the small to mid-sized mortgage company. And then the small to mid-sized mortgage company are going either non-delegated, the Barrett route, or they're closing down. They can't compete.
Yeah.
Or they're going to be crushed and pushed and relegated to a very small market set,
Yeah, especially when you add in opportunity costs, like all those 500 million to 1.5 billion. I know exactly what I would do if I were them. And I think AI is just confusing them with a million projects that are going to make them no money. And in a year, they're going to come around the forest and they're going to see the same tree and realize not only did they go nowhere, but they lost market share because they took their eye off how to help those loan officers in the zip code, worrying about trying to keep up with NFM on a Kaiser Sose, which is AI. Like, I mean, no one's really figured out even what when you go run the Boston Marathon here in Boston, the route. I don't even think people know what the route is, and they're already starting to run. And I think I'm not even saying the big IMBs have it figured out, in my opinion, but the small ones don't have time to be running. They're running right with them, and they're running themselves out of business or over to that non-Dell because the bigger companies have enough data to make up for some mistakes because, I think the data in the servicing, the data in the amount of everything allows the big lenders. I like Sapien's decision to me is like, I couldn't think of a better example. If you can write your decisioning layer of all the decisions you make, wouldn't it be easier to then build the AI? Like, we now know all the decisions. We have automated it. Now, how do we use AI to automate them faster, automate them at scale? Versus, I'd say a lot of these mortgage companies like immediately go to Claude or OpenAI because it sounds like what you're supposed to do. Like, that is synonymous with AI. So let me just start working in Claude, and if I vibe code in Claude, that counts as me doing AI. I don't know, does it? Like, I don't think so. I don't think so, but they do. I would get your decisions down, and once you see all your decisions, you'll realize that there are bigger ways to have AI completely change all those decisions.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I was talking to my buddy Rene Rodriguez, who's incredibly sophisticated with tools, and he built a full app that he's going to announce here of this particular product sometime soon. But it was shocking, the feature functionality that he was able to sort of outline and be able to bring to, not quite to market, but to bring to usability in a very short period of time, in like 72 hours. But he's incredibly sophisticated with the tools. Like he was, I would consider him a top 1% kind of user. Most of us aren't like that, which is why they're going to need power experts like you and others to be able to leverage your expertise to actually plan and roll those types of solutions out, because most aren't going to be able to do that. What are you doing this weekend, man, for July 4th? What are you doing? 250th?
We got a little barbecue. We got the fireworks today in our town, so we got the little barbecue. We go down. We take the kids to first time we're not doing it at our house. We sort of outgrew the audience, I guess, and so we have to go to somebody else's audience. They got the jump house. They got the burgers. They got what we need, and then we head over to the fireworks. Tomorrow we have the Horribles parade, so we're doing a Barbie theme. I'll be dressed up in pink, girl dad.
Nice.
Playing the Barbie soundtrack. We won't be doing the Aqua song. It's technically a little offensive if you nowadays if you listen to those late 90s lyrics. And then and then tomorrow we'll find, I guess, a neighboring town that has a firework. You're down on the Cape. The 4th's the big day down there, right? Or is it all weekend?
Oh yeah. We're at the Seacrest, and the kids are on the beach right now, and they were giving me a hard time to do this here, but no, they're having so much fun. And the Seacrest is an incredible resort in Falmouth. Incredible resort. The best beach in the Cape by far. The water's extremely warm. For relative to the Cape. It's not Miami, but it's pretty comfortable. So,
I think it's got a nice little like restaurant and like bar sort of in like the grass area, right there, right? Am I thinking of it?
Called
like
Reds.
It's a little fancy.
Yeah, it's called Reds. From the owner of the Celtics, and really? It's a great. Well, the original Arbach,
Yeah.
So it's just such a great, such a good bar and restaurant. But what I would say is, we'll have to do a meeting with you and I and Jeremy Potter and Brock Cassidy down here on the Cape, talk about the industry and come here to the Seacrest sometime.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I have to see the Seacrest now or stay at it. I'm sure it's going to be a.
It's great for kids because there's an indoor pool. There's an indoor pool and an outdoor pool, and then you're right in the ocean. So it's like you got 3 great options for little kids. I've been bringing my kids here since they were babies.
And I love that the Cape has made like mudslides their drink. Like you couldn't make an easier drink to drink and an excuse to have a nice chocolate milkshake with a little zip in it, in a morning. So and you don't feel guilty because it's the official drink of the Cape. But have fun down there. Don't go too deep into the ocean, right?
Sharks, baby. They're everywhere.
Yeah, have a great weekend. I love the shirt. USA.
Absolutely. Hey, really good to see you. Appreciate you giving us your insights. I always love having you on the show, and we'll keep the ball rolling. I am launching a new show called the Peak Performance Project. So I'm going to be interviewing loan officers. It's sponsored by Redder and, of course, NFM and a couple of other partners, where we're going to interview the top loan officers in every state in the United States for the next 52 weeks. So definitely looking forward to doing that, just to get
Are you going to do one state? Like you're going to do each state?
Every week is going to be dedicated. So next week, we're going to be dedicated to – it's going to start with Maine and then Vermont. I'm going to go through, New England and then go the rest. But every week, it's going to be a different state. And then we're going to focus on for the next 52 weeks. So I'll do 50 states and then I'll do Puerto Rico and Guam are going to be my, and I'll round it out for the next 52 weeks.
That's cool. Well, yeah, everybody always says somebody should do that, so I'm glad you're doing it.
So good. Well, we'll talk to you soon, man. Thanks for the time. And this is a wrap for Real Fridays on July 3rd, 2026. I appreciate you, Mike Keller.
Happy 4th. Oh,
take care. Happy birthday, America.